He walked into the bar, and everyone shouted one name: Norm! That wasn't just a TV line. That was a moment that made millions smile week after week. But now, that voice has gone quiet. George Wendt, the man who played Norm Peterson, on the famous show Cheers, has passed away at the age of 76. This news hit people hard, not just because he was a good actor, but because he was part of their lives. He was the friendly face at the end of a long day. He was the man who made people laugh when they needed it the most. And now, that laugh is gone. George Wendt wasn't born into fame. He was born in Chicago in 1948. Life didn't start easy for him. In fact, he was kicked out of university in his first year because his grades were so low. He had a 0.00 GPA. That's not a mistake, that's rock bottom. But instead of giving up, he took a different path. He found theater. He started learning acting, and it gave his life meaning. That simple decision, to not quit, changed everything. George once said, "Sometimes losing everything helps you find what really matters." He walked into the audition room for Cheers without knowing it would change his life. The producers were not expecting much, but the moment he spoke his lines, the room filled with real laughter. Not polite laughter, real belly laughs. They knew they had found someone special. Norm wasn't just a character, he was the everyday man, the tired worker, the honest friend. George brought him to life in a way that felt real. It was like Norm wasn't a role, it was a real person we all knew. When Cheers started in the 1980s, life was getting stressful for many. Families were falling apart, jobs were uncertain, and people were looking for something that felt steady. That's what Cheers gave them, a small bar full of friendly faces. George once said, "If I can make someone forget their problems for half an hour, then I've done something good." And he did that every single week. Cheers wasn't just a comedy, it was a home. Viewers connected with it because it showed people with real problems, real flaws, and real friendships. Norm had his struggles, but he kept showing up, just like many people do in real life. George played Norm in a way that made us feel like we knew him. He wasn't trying to be perfect, he was just trying to be honest. That's why he stood out in a cast full of big characters. Off camera, George Wendt was a gentleman. He didn't look for fame. He wasn't in the news all the time. He loved his wife, Bernadette, and their 3 children. While others chased big headlines, George cared more about his family and friends. Ted Danson, who played Sam Malone, once said, "George was the warmest soul on set. When he laughed, everyone felt better." That's the kind of man he was. George didn't have the body of a superhero. He didn't have the face of a model, and he didn't care. He showed up as he was, and people loved him for it. He reminded the world that being real is more important than being perfect. Compared to many actors today who feel pressure to be young, fit, or loud, George stood for something different. He stood for truth. He once joked, "I never went to the gym, I went to the bar, and it worked." George didn't jump from one flashy role to another. He didn't need to. He stayed close to who he was. He appeared in small movies, helped new actors, and never made a big fuss about anything. His co-star Rhea Perlman said, "He had this calm about him. You always felt safe around George." That kind of peace is rare in the acting world. George was more than an actor. He helped many people behind the scenes. He gave money to charity, especially to young artists who couldn't afford school or training. He remembered how hard it was when he started. He never forgot that struggle, and he helped others escape it. He didn't post about it. He didn't want credit. He just gave. Even after Cheers ended, George kept Norm alive. He played him again on The Simpsons, in commercials, and even on stage, and he never got tired of it. He said, "If people remember me as Norm, that's okay. It means I meant something." That's rare. Some actors get angry about being known for one role. George was the opposite. He saw it as a gift. People didn't just love Norm, they loved George. Many fans have shared stories about meeting him. One man said he met George at a small diner. He asked for a photo, and George not only said yes, he bought the man breakfast. Another fan said, "I saw him walking his dog. I told him my dad loved Cheers. He gave me a hug and said, 'Tell your dad Norm says hi.'" Those small moments are what people remember. Norm's lines weren't just funny, they were smart. When someone asked Norm how he was doing, he'd say things like, "It's a dog-eat-dog world and I'm wearing milk-bone underwear." It made you laugh, but it also made you think. George believed humor could carry truth. He said, "If you hide a little truth inside a joke, people listen." When the news came out that George Wendt had died, the internet flooded with clips, quotes, and memories. People shared their favorite Norm lines. They posted pictures. They said, "Thank you." In Boston, where Cheers was set, bars poured a drink in his honor. Some even left a seat open, just like Norm's seat. George didn't want a big goodbye. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family. There was no big story, no bright lights, just love. But somehow, the world felt different. Because when someone like George leaves, you notice the silence, and it hurts. George showed us that you don't need to be loud to be strong. That kindness is powerful. That showing up matters. He showed that even a man sitting at a bar could be a hero to millions, that even a simple joke could carry hope, and that being real is better than being perfect. Now that George is gone, what do we remember? We remember the laughter, the comfort, the feeling that someone out there understood us. But we're also left with questions. Why don't we value the quiet ones more? Why do we only notice their impact after they're gone? What made George Wendt truly unforgettable was not just the character he played, but the heart he brought to it. He never tried to act larger than life. He simply reflected life as it was. He brought comfort without preaching, humor without trying too hard, and emotion without ever overacting. In many ways, Norm became a mirror for viewers. People saw their own struggles, their own hopes, and their own weariness in him. That's why Norm wasn't just a joke on a sitcom. He became a symbol of everyday strength. And George gave him that life with patience, timing, and honesty. Even in his later years, George remained humble. He didn't chase headlines or try to reinvent himself for attention. When asked about fame, he laughed and said, "I got famous for sitting on a stool and drinking beer. How lucky is that?" It was this humility that kept him grounded. Unlike many stars who lost themselves in the spotlight, George stayed true to the Chicago kid who once flunked out of school. That down-to-earth attitude made him relatable, not just as an actor, but as a human being. Fans didn't just admire him, they felt like they knew him. One of the most touching things about George's journey was how he inspired others. Young comedians, struggling actors, even writers, many looked up to him. Not because he was flashy or rich, but because he proved that talent and kindness could live in the same person. He didn't make people feel small. He made them feel seen. In a world full of ego, George stood out because he made room for others to shine. And that, more than anything, may be his greatest legacy. As we say goodbye to George Wendt, we're left with more than memories. We're left with lessons about showing up, about treating people with warmth, about finding humor in the little things, and most importantly, about being proud of who you are, even if the world doesn't always notice. So today, raise a glass for Norm, not just for the laughs he gave us, but for the quiet strength he showed us. And ask yourself, who's going to be the norm for the next generation? Will it be you? In a world full of noise, how many people like George Wendt are we missing? Think about it. Who are today's norms? The bus driver who greets you every morning with a smile, the nurse who works long hours and never complains, the teacher who stays late to help a struggling student. These people don't ask for attention, but they deserve it. George Wendt never shouted. He never asked to be seen, but we saw him, and we'll never forget him. So here's a question for you. Who are the norms in your life, and have you told them what they mean to you?